Imagine this. It is a damp spring morning in 1750. You step out of a swaying wooden carriage onto the Pont Neuf, Europe's most famous bridge, and the world assaults you all at once. The smell crashes first, a living, choking fog of horse urine steaming in the gutters, rotting fish heads and cabbage cores dumped from market carts, black sewage bubbling up from every alley grate, the sharp iron tang of fresh animal blood from butchers' stalls only yards away. The noise follows like a wave. Cartwheels grinding on uneven cobblestones, fishwives screaming prices until their voices break into hoarse croaks, vendors hawking miracle cures and cheap ribbons, beggars coughing wetly in the shadows, a distant church bell clanging like an urgent warning across the river.
You look left. A noblewoman in a towering powdered wig and rustling silk panniers glides past in a gilded sedan chair, carried by sweating servants in livery, her face painted corpse white with toxic lead makeup, fake black beauty spots glued to her cheeks like deliberate lies. You look right. A child, maybe 7 years old, barefoot, ribs like ladder rungs under filthy linen rags, scrabbles desperately in the gutter for a mouldy crust of bread that fell from a baker's basket, nearly crushed by the next cartwheel. This single frozen second is Paris at its absolute peak and its absolute lowest. The dazzling capital of the Western world, the beating heart of the Enlightenment that will soon set fire to thrones across the globe, yet also a medieval cesspit of 600,000 to 650,000 souls packed into disease-ridden streets, drowning in inequality, hunger, filth, and barely contained fury.
Using cutting-edge AI, we resurrect this vanished city. Centuries-old engravings, oil paintings, maps, and drawings transformed into vivid, breathing, photorealistic scenes. You will smell the river, hear the bells toll, feel the tension coil tighter and tighter until it explodes in 1789. If you are ready to walk these beautiful, deadly streets and witness the city that gave birth to the modern age through genius, beauty, and blood, stay with me. This is the long, unfiltered, chapter-by-chapter truth of Paris in the 1700s. Chapter 1. The Seine River, the stinking lifeline that fed, sustained, and slowly poisoned Paris. The Seine was Paris, its blood, its breath, its open sewer. In the mid-17th century, it was not the clean, romantic tourist river we know today. It was a thick, brown, foul-smelling working artery that carried everything the city needed and everything it wanted to forget. Every single day, tens of thousands of chamber pots were emptied into it from houses, tenements, and palaces along the banks. Upstream tanneries dumped barrels of acidic dye, lime, and urine used for softening hides. Slaughterhouses on Ile de la Cité and both banks bled cattle, pigs, sheep straight into the current. Blood, entrails, offal, swirling in red-brown clouds. Industrial waste from dye works, soap boilers, fullers who cleaned wool with fermented urine, all poured in unchecked. The smell was not just bad. It was a physical force. Visitors from London or Vienna often vomited on first arrival. They pressed scented handkerchiefs or pomanders filled with cloves, lavender, and ambergris to their noses, but nothing could block it completely.
Parisians called it le parfum de la ville, the perfume of the city, with bitter, resigned irony. Yet this poisoned river was the only reason Paris survived and thrived. Timber rafts from the vast forests of Burgundy and Champagne floated enormous oak logs downstream, hundreds of tons every week, for new buildings, ship repairs at the arsenal, scaffolding, firewood for winter hearths. Grain barges from the fertile plains of Picardy Beauce and Champagne unloaded sack after sack of wheat, rye, barley at the Port de Glève, Port Saint-Nicolas, and other quays. Without these shipments, the city would face famine in weeks, bread riots in days. Wine boats from the Loire, Rhône, and Bordeaux valleys carried thousands of barrels of red, white, and rosé for taverns, palaces, monasteries, convents, and the growing middle-class tables. Coal barges from the mines of the north fueled the bakeries that produced the daily bread ration every Mystery plays performed on wooden stages outside the portals, bonfires blazing in squares, shared feasts of bread and wine for rich and poor alike. Philosophers and early free thinkers whispered dangerous ideas in the shadows of the portals, risking charges of heresy from the church. The great bells, Emmanuel, Marie, Gabriel, marked every part of daily life. Matins at dawn, Angelus at noon, curfew at dusk, alarms for fire or invasion. In the 1700s, Notre Dame still bridged heaven and earth, a towering sanctuary amid the stench and chaos. Later, Baron Haussmann demolished the crowding medieval houses in the 19th century, creating the wide-open parvis we know today. The devastating fire of April 15, 2019, destroyed the spire and much of the roof. But restoration work continues, proof that even stone cathedrals can rise from ashes, just as Paris itself has risen again and again. Chapter 3. Palaces and Markets. The violent contrast between extreme luxury and extreme misery. Paris in the 1700s was defined by brutal, almost unbearable contrasts, nowhere more visible than between its palaces and its markets. The Hôtel de Soissons, built between 1572 and 1584 for Catherine de' Medici, was a Renaissance masterpiece that still radiated power in the 1700s. Its most striking feature was the 28-meter-high astronomical column, a slender tower topped with a dome where Catherine, obsessed with prophecy and fate, consulted astrologers by candlelight, terrified for the futures of her sons who would become kings of France. By the 1700s, the palace had passed to the princes of Carignan. Inside, rooms dripping with gold leaf, walls hung with tapestries depicting classical myths and biblical scenes, marble fireplaces roaring with oak logs, even in summer to ward off the damp. Formal gardens were pure French Renaissance, geometric parterres of clipped boxwood and lavender, bubbling fountains carved with mythological figures, shaded alleys where courtiers in embroidered silk coats and powdered wigs strolled, gossiping about scandals at Versailles, quoting Voltaire's latest satire, mocking Rousseau's radical ideas. Servants in livery swept gravel paths every hour, trimmed roses to perfection, kept the garden an oasis of order and perfume in a city that stank of decay. But literally next door lay Les Halles, Paris's central food market since the 12th century, a sensory assault that never stopped day or night. Mountains of cabbages, turnips, leeks, onions piled high in wooden stalls. Butchers hacked at cow and pig carcasses with cleavers, blood running in open gutters. Fishmongers gutted cod, eels, herrings, mackerel on blood-stained slabs, scales flying like confetti. Poultry sellers wrung necks of chickens and geese in cages, feathers drifting like snow. The ground was perpetual sludge, rotting vegetables, animal entrails, fish brine. The stench was so overpowering that newcomers often fainted on first visit. The contrast was savage. Palace gardens of perfume and geometry versus market hell of blood, rot, and survival. A visual scream of inequality that fueled the revolution. On the left bank stood the Hôtel de Luynes, home to one of France's richest and most influential noble families. Classical facade with Corinthian columns and pediments, private river quay for discreet arrivals by boat,
vast salons lit by crystal chandeliers for balls and receptions, intimate boudoirs lined with silk damask, libraries filled with forbidden books and Enlightenment manuscripts.
Gardens bloomed with tulips imported from Holland, roses from Ottoman lands, exotic fruits grown in heated orangeries. These aristocratic hotels were private universes, self-contained luxury where nobles hosted the most famous salons of the age. Evenings of music, philosophy, theatre, where Voltaire's sharp wit sliced through superstition. Rousseau's passion attacked inequality. Diderot read drafts of the Encyclopédie aloud to gasps and applause. Yet outside the high walls, ordinary Parisians lived 10 to a damp cellar room, shared one bucket for waste, died young from disease or hunger. The gap between palace and street was not just physical. It was moral dynamite waiting for a spark. Chapter 4. Hidden Enclaves, Science, and the Overwhelming Shadow of Versailles. Paris hid entire secret worlds inside its walls.
The Temple Quarter, originally the European headquarters of the Knights Templar in the 12th century, had passed to the Knights of Malta after the Templars' brutal suppression in 1307. By the 1700s, it was a semi-autonomous enclave, exempt from most royal taxes, free from guild regulations. This status made it magnetic. Luxury craftsmen flocked here, jewelers setting diamonds and emeralds for court ladies, watchmakers assembling intricate mechanisms with Swiss precision, cabinet makers inlaying ebony and tortoiseshell with mother-of-pearl. Nobles built discreet townhouses for mistresses, gambling dens, private libraries of forbidden books. The neoclassical gateway opened onto a maze of courtyards, workshops, chapels, and hidden gardens buzzing with clandestine activity. Later, in August 1792, its ancient tower became the grim prison for Louis XVI, Marie Antoinette, their children, and Madame de Lamballe, the royal family's last stop before the guillotine. Napoleon ordered the entire complex demolished between 1808 and 1811 to erase any royalist shrine. Today, nothing remains. Science also flourished in Paris's quieter corners. The Paris Observatory, founded in 1667 by Louis XIV, was his bold claim that France would lead the world in knowledge. Its building was precisely aligned to cardinal directions. Its meridian line became the reference for all French maps until Greenwich took over in 1884. Giovanni Domenico Cassini discovered 4 moons of Saturn from its rooftop telescopes. Located on the southern edge of the city, away from coal smoke and city haze, it represented royal ambition at its most enlightened.
Les Invalides, begun in 1670, was another rare act of royal compassion. A vast military hospital and retirement home for wounded and disabled veterans who would otherwise beg on streets. It could house up to 4,000 men in dormitories, infirmaries, workshops. They lived under strict military discipline, daily masses, work in carpentry or tailoring shops, parades on the huge esplanade. The Golden Dome, completed in 1706 by Jules Hardouin Mansart, became one of Paris's most recognizable silhouettes. Today it houses Napoleon's tomb and the Army Museum. But no portrait of 18th century Paris is complete without Versailles. The colossal monument hosted the sharpest minds of the age. Voltaire's acid wit shredded religious superstition and royal tyranny in pamphlets smuggled under cloaks. Rousseau's Discourse on Inequality and The Social Contract argued that civilization corrupted natural goodness and that legitimate government came only from the people's will. Diderot and D'Alembert's Encyclopédie, 28 volumes published secretly, compiled all human knowledge while quietly attacking dogma, privilege, and absolute monarchy. These ideas spread through cafes, underground presses, letters,
whispered conversations, reaching not just nobles, but lawyers, shopkeepers, artisans, soldiers, printers.
They planted seeds, reason over tradition, liberty over divine right, equality over birth, fraternity over hierarchy. By the late 1780s, France was bankrupt. Costly wars, including aid to American revolutionaries, Versailles extravagance, poor harvests, bread prices soared. Starving crowds rioted. Louis XVI, weak and indecisive, called the Estates General in May 1789, first time in 175 years. The Third Estate, commoners, demanded real power, formed the National Assembly, swore the tennis court oath. Tensions snapped. July 13, 1789. Furious mob stormed Saint-Lazare prison and monastery, believing grain was hoarded while people starved. They freed prisoners, looted stores, wrecked buildings. July 14th. Thousands marched on the Bastille, medieval fortress prison, hated symbol of royal arbitrary power. Governor Delaunay refused surrender. Negotiations collapsed. Cannons roared from Place de la Bastille. Muskets cracked. Smoke choked the air. After 4 hours of fierce fighting, the fortress fell. Delaunay and guards were beheaded, heads paraded on pikes through streets. Only 7 prisoners were freed, but the Bastille's fall became the revolution's defining moment. It was demolished by November 1789. The site is now Place de la Bastille. July 14th is France's national holiday, Bastille Day. Behind every palace, every salon, every idea lay the brutal reality. Cramped attics shared by 10 people, no sanitation, frequent epidemics killing thousands, children working 14-hour days, resentment boiling into rage. From this crucible of beauty and brutality emerged the modern world. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. Words that would reshape governments, human rights, and societies forever. Thank you for this long, deep journey through 18th century Paris. Its splendor, its rot, its genius, its fire. If this gripped you, like the video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, which city and which era should we explore next? Your hometown might be featured soon. Until then, we'll see you in the past.